Hi everyone, welcome to our Shakespeare unit. So this video basically is just going to show you some important things and where to locate some stuff and give you just a brief overview of how this 5 weeks is going to run. What you want to make sure to do is obviously look at these two resources first. You're watching the video now. So as you go in to gather your resources, uh, anything that we're reading for the unit is going to be in here. So this week, we're going to read Pyramus and Thisbe. And then next week, we're actually starting Romeo and Juliet. We're not reading Romeo and Juliet this week. We've got to do a little bit of background stuff first, and then we'll get into Romeo and Juliet next week. But when you do go to read Romeo and Juliet, you're going to be able to read it here. So there's two places actually you can read Romeo and Juliet. So this is the original or the original version of Romeo and Juliet, right? So this is basically goes through, gives you all of the acts, gives you the characters, gives you some footnotes in case you have questions about like what they're saying and you're not really sure about some of the language. So you have that original resource to use. If you're feeling brave and you really love Shakespeare and it's not a challenge for you, I say read that section, right? However, if you're like me and Shakespeare's a little hard for you because it was very hard for me when I had to read it for the first time, there is a side-by-side version where you have the original text and then you have a modern text to the so if it were me, this is what I would try to do. I would read this side first, and then I'd be like, ooh, I have no idea what he's saying over there. So then I'd come over here and kind of maybe scan through it real quick just to get the gist of maybe what was actually going on. So there is going to be in our class a reading schedule that I will have for you in the announcements. And in that reading schedule, I will be using this as with the page numbers, if that makes sense. So down here, it's going to say like page 1, 2. So this is what that reading schedule will be referring to, not the first one that I showed you. So you have the first one that if you want to use it, that's great. But I would really recommend for most of you to be over here using this one. That way, if you need this translated version, you're able to easily do that. Okay. So that's the first thing. So that's where you're going to find. Later on this week, we're going to read Pyramus and Thisbe. This is where you're going to find Pyramus and Thisbe. Okay. So it's going to be right there. A glossary, there's literary and dramatic elements, there is a PowerPoint, there's all kinds of resources here for you to use. I would recommend on Monday as you're going through, this is what you're supposed to be doing on Monday is going through all of these, just making sure to look through the resources, okay? So that's going to be important. Setting the stage is the next thing that you're going to look at, and the way the class will run is that every week you will have, except for this week, every week you'll have one assignment and you will have one quiz. So technically you're only going to have 2 assignments each week. However, there's a lot of reading, as you can imagine, with Romeo and Juliet. So the majority of what you're doing is going to be reading, okay? So that's really important to know. The other thing that I want to make sure that you're aware of is as we start reading, and you'll be able to see, is that you have what we call a theme evidence chart, and we'll go over that more in detail. But this theme evidence chart is not going to be due until week 7. You will start it next week. And basically what you'll do is every week you will fill it out with what you've read from the act, and you will talk about theme and that. And we'll discuss that later. But just know that you will be doing this every week, and you will also have that not due until the very last week, 7, that when we're reading the very last act of Romeo and Juliet. So if you look, the assignment for 1, we have a character assignment and then a quiz. So then you will obviously have some other resources in here. So we have PowerPoint presentations that you look at from Act 1. We have notes and summaries that you're going to be able to look at. So basically, lots of resources to help you. And each week it will be laid out that way. So just to give you an idea of what it's like. So in week 5 for Act 2, you'll have another assignment, and then you'll also have more a quiz that you're looking at as well. And then you'll have Act 2 quiz, and then same thing for Act 3, and then Act 4 and 5. So that theme assignment will be due down here in week 7. So that's really important to remember, okay? So as you're reading through, what's going to be really important for you is that you want to stay as much on pace as possible. You do not want to get behind. So you have the option, because this you're reading and you're accessing the actual play itself, you have the option to read ahead if you would like to. So you definitely, if you want to read ahead, that's great. But if you get too far behind, that's really going to hinder you. So I don't want you to get too far behind. Okay, so just make sure that you're trying to stay on pace with the reading. We will also be having probably more frequent class connects during Romeo and Juliet, because there's so much content to cover. So those Tuesdays that we make optional sometimes probably will not be will be a required session usually, which you're going to see this week for the first week, just because we have so much content to cover with Romeo and Juliet. So as you're working, please let me know if you have questions. There's a lot that we're going to cover over the next 5 weeks. So make sure that you are participating in Class Connect. Make sure that you are really focusing on keeping on pace, and that you're making sure to ask questions if you do not understand something. Okay, so if you have questions about anything, please let me know. But I'm excited to start our unit, and I'm hoping you guys love it as much as